And today's webinar is going to be the CTC plumbing systems with MEPPP in VDC. My name is Joe Levija. I'm a senior MEP technical specialist here with ATG USA, and I'll be doing this presentation today. Here's a brief piece of information about me. Worked in the industry since 2015. I've also worked within both sides of the industry, on the design side and in industrial or in the MEP engineering firms. And I've also worked on the VDC side, working for both a contractor as well as working with a third-party engineering firm where we did all the BIM services, and then we ran more of the integrated projects. So we had engineers on staff to assist while in the construction, more like a design build type projects. Okay, so today's webinar that we're going through will discuss taking the existing plumbing Revit model from the engineer and applying the MEPPP, MEP Productivity Pack content to it and setting up the existing model for your VDC project. Also, today we're going to go through some learning objectives. Some of the basic things we're going to look to accomplish is just discussing, transferring project standards. So making sure that we just kind of talk about what standards from our contracting firm or our firm in general that we're going to transfer over into our existing model. We're also going to discuss content to be loaded within the project that we're currently working on. And then we're also going to discuss what to purge out of the engineer's model. And that is a very big topic of discussion, specifically because when we're talking about receiving an engineering model and then working from that model can already be heavy. So having to add additional content, additional standards, and so on and so forth can definitely bog a model down real quick, as we all know. Okay, so it is time to dive into Revit, and I'm pulling up my Revit models right now. So you guys should see this flip here in just a moment. Okay. All right, so we made it into Revit. I see a question out here. So I see we have a question out here asking what VDC is. So that's a very good question. Thank you for that question. VDC, for some of you guys who are not have not really seen much of VDC or heard too much of VDC, VDC is virtual design and construction. It's coordination when we move to the phase of our project. So if you think about a project from start to finish, it's when we move out of the design side of the modeling and of the whole project and into the construction side. So on some of those larger projects, you guys may have heard that once it leaves the engineering firms and goes to the contractor at that point will be responsible for turning over a fully coordinated model with everything in its precise location. There will be shop drawings created, and we are hearing now fab drawings as well created off of that. So that's what VDC stands for, and that's kind of the idea behind VDC. So VDC as well is going to be basically it's going to take a well-rounded engineering model, and we're going to bring everything down very, very precise. So all our families, for instance, We're not going to see too many boxes on the wall. We're not going to have generic families necessarily out there. We're going to have families dedicated to having specific information tied into them. And then they're also going to be built in a way to where they're the exact size as the cut sheet of what's being installed within the project. And then the coordination side of that within VDC, once we get it into the contracting world, is going to talk about making sure that, being that we have these families in the models and they're active size, and we're actively coordinating, we're going to make sure that, for instance, if you got a 60-inch flat screen going up on a wall, that we don't have a light fixture that may be hanging 2 feet down from the ceiling. We're going to make sure that that light fixture is not actually impeding the vision of that monitor. Or other situations, we're going to make sure when we're running piping and ductwork, we're going to make sure that not only do we have our piping going either under or over top of our ductwork accordingly, but we're going to make sure we're accounting for all of the insulation, and we're going to also make sure that we're accounting for any of all hangers that are going up as well to mount to deck. So that's the difference between kind of where we see things coming out of a design firm, architect's office, so on and so forth, and moving into the contracting industry within VDC. Does that help answer your question? Awesome, thank you. Okay, so here's the basic model I have pulled up here. And if you notice, I'm in Revit 2019 right now. And within Revit 2019, what I'm seeing here is I've got just one of our models already kind of pre-separated. This is the plumbing model. Now, traditionally in VDC, once we receive our contract with the owner in this case, what we're going to be doing from an MEP standpoint is, depending on where we're contracted, so if we're the plumbing contractor, or in some cases you'll see some integrated companies that may have, they may do mechanical contracting, plumbing, and possibly even electrical. What we're going to do is we're going to separate out our portion of the model, so in this case plumbing, from the overall MEP model that we received from the engineering firm. Okay, so sometimes some engineering firms, they'll, depending on the size of the project, they'll have them already separated. That works. Other times they're fully packed models with full MEP inside, and we have to cut them up ourselves. So by experience, that can be another couple hours to even a full day worth of additional work in order to cut up an MEP model. Okay. We're going to discuss what we do once we cut up that MEP model for this plumbing VDC, and utilizing the MEPPP to help on our end. So you guys on the design side of things, you guys have your own set standards, you have your own set way of doing things, you have your own deliverables that you have to follow. Our deliverables, once we get into VDC, completely different. Okay, we start thinking about shop drawings. Up here in the Midwest, we're seeing quite a bit of companies going into the world of fabrication. So something that I've heard throughout the industry is it's cheaper to put somebody in a fab shop fabbing stuff that fits on the back of a truck for, say, a $20+ an hour range, versus putting somebody in field fabricating on the fly at 50, 70, 80 bucks an hour. So that's why we're starting to see some of this transition, and that requires us to have a well-coordinated model in this case. So what I'm showing here is I just have a VDC model pulled up. It's already been separated, it's already been cut through. And what we're doing at this point is we're looking, and we're going to transition from stuff like this into what we now know is going to be things we need to account for. So Stepping into a model like this, what we need to do, we first want to start thinking about, well, what are we tying into it and where are we putting our model? Some cases, these models are going to go onto our standard file server. So that's where we're going to save our model and we're going to deal with it. In other cases, especially if you get into a larger project, I've been on some where we have upwards of 15 different companies in that project, one for every single piece of something that's going into this building or into this design, whether it's theme or whatever. So we want to think about that. We want to think about where we're going to stick all these additional models, because we're going to have to coordinate them and sit in meetings on all this stuff weekly and regularly in order to make sure we get all this information out. In some cases, and in a lot of cases, we're seeing BIM 360 in this case, kind of take the place of a standard file server, especially on the contracting side, because in VDC as well, something you got to think about is we're not always in the office. I mean, we'll sit on site for the first 3 to 6 months, depending on the size of the project, so that way we're working hand in hand with not only our foreman and our guys doing the install, we'll be also working hand in hand with the overall GC of the project and some of the other disciplines out there as well. So those are some things that we'll be thinking about. But in this case, back to what we're going over here. What we're going to do is we're going to clear out everything that is needed or that is not needed per se from the engineering drawings. So that would be these views. That would be any additional sheets that we may not need, so on and so forth. That'd be any families that may be just kind of sitting idle out there. When you start out some of these projects, going into that manage tab and using the purge unused before you start adding your content in there, I do that. I do that fairly often because, I mean, not everyone is going to have a $7,000, $10,000, $12,000 laptop to work off of or PC, and performance is an issue. Especially, I've worked on projects where I was working on a stadium and working on a high rise and working on a theme park ride, and all those buildings or all those projects took an hour and a half to open up, and that makes it troublesome. So that's why we'll purge everything out. And prior to purging, naturally, just make sure what I always suggest, grab a copy of all those PDFs, save an archived copy of that model back in either a receivables folder or in an archive folder. That way you can go back if you need to. So we'll purge first, and then we'll start deleting all the content. So any of these extra sheets, any of these extra views, any of the extra families. If you've had some companies who are working on projects and they've got, the 1,000,002 section problem where everybody just pulls a brand new section every time they need to do some modeling of duct or piping, clear through a chunk of those. Start bringing in your own stuff shortly after, and you don't need all that extra stuff just flooding your model. So at that point, once we clear through all this type of information, we're going to go in and after we've, of course, had our initial coordination meeting where we should have received our BIM execution plan, we know exactly what we need to cater towards. So line types, to colors of systems, to what needs to be shot off into Navis and how it needs to be shot off into Navis. So those NWC files are going to create. We'll start to drop in our project standards. So that's the first thing I go through is I'll add my project standards into my exact model that I'm working in. So for some of you guys who don't necessarily utilize the transfer project standards very often, pretty simple. In order to start this process, before you click on the transfer project standards, find the model that you're looking to work off of. So in this case, I'm looking to work off of my MEP productivity pack model. It's it's going to be my starter model that I currently have. So what I'm going to do is copy from, pull down to MEPPP starter project, detach from central, got my information in here. And then I'm going to select this check none. And when I select this check none, what it's going to do is it's going to allow me to go through and I can transfer in what I prefer to transfer in. We don't need everything because, as we already know, we've got a model that's already got information in it. And the least amount that we can transfer that will make us successful is the goal here, so we don't explode our model in size. So we still need to be able to definitely work in it throughout the day. So the first things that I go through is, in this case, we're working in plumbing. So I'm going to transfer things across. I do arrowhead styles. Let's see what else I'm going to go through. I'm going to have some of my other specific items that I know I'm going to need. My flex piping. I'm also going to have, we'll go down here to piping systems. I'm going to have all my pipe information, pipe types, insulation, schedule types, segments, sizes, all that other valuable information that will all be in here as well. Because as the contracting side of the world, one thing you got to think about is we don't have a lot of time in order to get stuff to the field. Things are being installed as we speak. Okay, so we're basically, in some cases, we're hopefully 2 or 3 days behind, or we're hopefully 2 or 3 days ahead of installation while we're coordinating. But realistically, we're a couple of hours. And if something happens in field, especially I had a project where we didn't have all the chases lined up going up the building. I mean, this is a 10-story building. So that stopped the design, and we had to go back and we had to fix that. Another situation, another scenario, we had footings coming in, and Southern Florida project, footings got larger overnight. All our underground had to be redone in literally a couple of hours. So that's why we're bringing in these different project standards here in order to make sure that we don't have to redo anything. We don't have to really think about, do we have a system for that? What do we need to do for abbreviations? What do we need to do for color? What do we need to do for any and all view templates, and so on and so forth? So those are some things that I'm going through and I'm bringing across. Also bringing across my text type. Big thing to have on hand, have those view templates, because it's easier to have view templates already created. Go in here, create your view in your project browser, and apply that view template, and within the snap of a finger, you're working. So those are some things that I'm going to bring across as well. Viewport types, those are some things that I like to bring across also. And then kind of outside of that, I may come back for more items. So section types, that'd be something I'd bring across. And just some other variable items, just to make my life a little bit easier, and to make sure that I've got object styles for printing. I've got everything kind of ready to go, so I don't have to necessarily worry too much, and we can hit the ground running. So I'm going to bring these items across just simply by clicking OK. What that's going to do is that's going to bring everything across that I need. You're going to see a box. It's going to give you the option of overwrite or new only. I overwrite. That's how I tend to do things, because I don't want to have, for instance, the same view template that may already be in here. I don't want that to have a little one after it, and I have to go clean all that stuff up, and too much time. Time is definitely not of the essence with any of our projects overall, but VDC especially, time is hard to come by. We're already working 60, 80-hour weeks in some cases, so those are some of the options that we want to try and help avoid later on in the future. Okay, so I'm transferring project standards at this point. It may take a couple minutes to transfer project standards. That's normally how this comes across. The VDC, or not the VDC, but the MEPPP that we currently have, that's a pretty large file. It's well thought out. All our standards are already included in there. All our systems and everything are already designed and set up and so on and so forth. So that's why we go through that whole process of transferring all that stuff across. So now, after we get this transferred across, the next thing that I like to really start to dive into is I like to make sure if we're utilizing our title block, we've got that in play. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. It depends on what the GC says. Sometimes they have their own title blocks, and that's for us to submit our shop drawings to. So I'll get that loaded in there, save that as a project family, drop that into the model. That works. And then from that point, I will start, I'll go into insert from file. So what you can insert from file will be things like your schedules that you may need. The MEP productivity pack has a lot of quantification schedules. Those help tremendously. So once we get the quantification schedules out here, other things, we may actually have a whole series of sheets already pre-saved from previous projects. We can drop those in there. They're already partially named. We can adjust a little bit here and there with the schedule, of course. And we can just change out the title block, basically. And that will help kind of save a little bit of time there. All these little 1% time savings will definitely save in the long run and give you a much better return on investment throughout the life of the project, just by doing some of these quick workflows here. So, and then at that point, you guys know the next step is going to be start creating all our different views. In fact, I'll go through some of that here in a moment. Excuse me. And once we go through some of that, there are a couple options for creating views. So I'm going to discuss just kind of the standard of creating views. Everybody is aware of basically how we tend to do some of the creating of views. I'm right now opening up another Revit because this other Revit that I currently have seems to be slowing down a hair. But we also have some tools that complement the MEP productivity pack as well, referred to as the view creator. So if you're a drawing manager, you guys know the task it takes to set up views. Most of you guys do. Well, View Creator gives us an option to do that at a faster pace, basically, and we can even apply things like our view templates and so on and so forth as well. So we can go through that tool. In fact, this afternoon at 2 o'clock, we will have one of our guys, Zach, here. He'll be doing an in-depth dive on that tool as well. So if you're interested, definitely stay tuned for that webinar coming up here soon. At 2 o'clock. So checking to see if we've got our Revit model coming back here. Let's see here. And I'm just going to talk to some of this while we're waiting for this to load. And here we are. So those are some of those basic items that we're going to go through. And then after we create our views, we're going to assign our view templates. Keep in mind with our views that we're going to create, certain things we're looking to create are going to be views dedicated to our system. So with us utilizing plumbing in general, in our plumbing world, we're going to have, depending on the facility or the building that you're putting up, my example that I have here is a healthcare facility. We're doing one level of a hospital. In that level, I'm going to have a view dedicated strictly to med gas. Med gas is its own entity when it comes to working in VDC and creating a view, especially something to shoot out to Navis as well. So we'll have multiple views for just med gas. So we'll have our Navis view, which is going to be our 3D view. We're going to have our plan view, which will cover strictly our plan. And I tend to have a working view, a coordination view, and I also tend to have a shop drawings view, as we call it. Kind of like what you guys have on the design side, where you have your construction doc view, your coordination, and your working view. That way, in working, you guys can go through, add whatever construction lines you need to, add whatever text you need to, just dedicated towards you, especially as you're working on that throughout the duration of a project schedule. So SDs, DDs, CDs, so on and so forth, or preliminary and final reviews, so on and so forth. So that's the idea of the working view. Maybe have something loaded in the background. For instance, if you're working with plumbing, you may have duct in your working views as well. So that way, as you're coordinating up and down and all your different runs, you got something to coordinate around. When going into coordination views, having those coordination views, the way we work with that is I turn a lot of different stuff on and I turn a lot of different stuff off in coordination views, but I have multiple items, more than just one system in coordination views. And then finally, I have my last set of docs that I'll have out here, which will be our construction docs or our shop drawing docs. That's the clean and clear, because normally when they say jump, we have to say how high. So I like to have something ready to go at the drop of a hat when it comes to a view, because it gets asked for at random times. We don't have time to produce. So we drop a view, so that way at least we just click the print button and it goes. So those are some thoughts that traditionally I set up within my VDC projects. Okay, and then I have view templates dedicated towards those. Also, I'll have separate views when it comes to some of the different systems. So of course we'll have our under deck view or underground view, or so on and so forth. For all our plumbing that's below deck, we'll also have separate views set up for some of our domestic and some of our event and stuff like that. We'll have views designed for all that. We'll have those in plan view. We'll also have those in our Navis views as well. So that way we can separate systems out. And when we go to do our clash detection out in Navis, which we can do as a firm internally and naturally on the meetings, we set up some of our different selection rules out there. So that way, if we have separate models per se, or separate NWC files for all those, it's easier to just select that specific NWC file when you append everything to that NWD, than it is to sit there and screw around with diving through this one giant size NWC file that encompasses every system altogether. So that's why we'll have some of that stuff out there. Let's see here if I have something coming up. Okay, so it looks like here, naturally, permission things coming up. That's what was going on there. So just scan through that, click out of that, and I am going back into Revit. Okay, so here's some of the other, here's the model here that we have. So we went through some of this. Now I'm going to tie this down a little bit. So when we talk about some of the views we created, here is kind of more of what I have for a finished product here. And then this is the MEPPP. I'm going to close this now, being that we already transferred our project standards. And then here's some of our finished products. So when we're looking here, you're going to see that I have, let's see, hang on a second, it's giving me trouble. Okay, here we go. So I have this set up here, and now we can all see this. Make sure we're in the correct one. Yep. Okay. So now what I'm showing here is I've got certain things. I got my browser organization that I brought over, so I can change my browser organization dedicated towards what I'm accustomed to working with instead of working with something that may be foreign to me. So I've got my coordination views. I've got some of my deliverable views. I've got my shop drawings. If I get down here, I've got some of my Navis views out here. So if you can see this here, I've got multiple coordinates because of the size of the building. And then I've got my med gas. I've got my overall plumbing. And here's an additional file out here as well. And then I've also got some additional VDC files. So we still have people out there in the world who like to work off of AutoCAD. So some of these additional deliverable files here may be AutoCAD files, or maybe something that we include in our shop drawing. So those are some of the options that are out there as well. And then on top of that, here are some of our elevations and everything like that that we're going to have for kind of rolling through. Okay. So here's some of what I have created already over here. And if you notice, as you click on things and we scroll down our properties palette, we can already see we have a whole series of different view templates, which after you go through and you drop all your stuff in here, you should not see too many of the view templates left from whoever the initial engineer is. I'd leave a couple just in case there's things that you may need to go back to. We'll leave a couple views with those view templates applied, just in case you need to go back and look at something for reference or whatever. That's fine. That's great. I suggest that. But then the rest of the stuff will be more tied directly to what we need, for instance. Okay, and then in this case, for instance, I'm looking at our med gas deliverable, and if you guys can see here, I've already got some of my filters already pre-created. So that way I don't have to sit here and mess around with this too much, and this is already applied and set to go. So just kind of a brief introduction into this information. We'll also want to make sure we save our shared parameter file that we'll be utilizing. So with the MEP Productivity Pack, we have a very elaborate shared parameter file. The reason we have an elaborate shared parameter file is because we want to make sure we can schedule. We want to make sure that as we move through things, all our GUID numbers and everything along those lines are matching up correctly. So we have families built, we have all our piping, all our duct, all our fixtures, and so on and so forth, where those parameters apply to that that overall large share parameter file, and all our ID numbers, our GUID numbers, and everything, they match up correctly. So as we work in here, as we're working, if we click on one of these pipes that we have out here, and we go in and we have to start identifying things, changing diameter, changing pipe type, changing system type, whatever we need to do, that automatically hits our schedules. Okay, and all that does is that saves everybody time right down the line. So those are some of those basic things that we'll have in here. Some things that I like to bring in, maybe some of our fixtures. So those will be some families that we'll bring in, maybe some of our fixtures, and I'll go into our systems tab here, and I'll take a look at some of our plumbing fixtures. So we'll have some of our plumbing fixtures, maybe we'll have some of our boxes and everything along those lines for med gas, and so on and so forth. Those will be some of those items that we will make sure we'll bring across. The reason why we do that is because one, they're schedulable. Two, there are certain items that require clearance zones. That's another thing. Three, if you're working with, depending on the architect or the engineering firm you're working behind at this point, they may have more generic items in there. So we're going to look for something within the catalog of the manufacturer or so on. And the expectation here is when we bring some of these fixtures and stuff like this across, we're bringing specific items dedicated to this project, because as we talked about with VDC, we can't go with a generic item. We have to go with the exact dimensions of the specific item we're going to be installing, because down to that 1/16 of an inch matters. Okay, that really is what we're looking for. And in some cases, I mean, we're going with a very, very high tolerance at that point, or higher tolerance than that. So that's why we have some of these items here, and that's the expectation. Make sure you're either, if you're bringing in something from, say, the parameter, from a manufacturer, we can utilize some of these tools like our parameter jammer and stuff like that in order to properly bring across these parameters and not necessarily have to fight the fight of going in and creating some of that stuff in order for it to schedule. So that's kind of the idea behind this. And that's how we tend to set up a lot of this type of stuff. Top of that, we'll start to we'll start working on the project, and we'll basically the idea of going through this process here would be to hit the ground running. So that way we don't have to fight when we have to start producing this whole long list down here of the different shop drawings dedicated to this project. So all right, so that's kind of the briefing of the presentation of what I have here. And we're going to go back into our PowerPoint at this point. So let's just kind of recap a little bit of what we talked about here. Some of what we talked about discussing what to transfer in project standards. So that'd be the MEPPP pipe systems, and then all our pipe settings in general. We'll transfer also browser organization and view temps. Those are other two great items to have transferred over as well. And then any of our other things like our text, maybe our object styles and stuff for printing, some of our printing stuff, we already have that pre-set up. That's always great to bring over as well. And then from that point, what else we discussed here would be, we discussed content to be loaded into the project. So we're gonna want to bring our starter view across. We'll have our own starter view. We'll also want to think about bringing our title block that we're going to need. Any sheets we may already be created that we can just apply into the model, that'd be perfect. And then any and all schedules that we know we're going to need for the project. Okay, and then finally we also we discussed what to purge out of that engineering model, and this is very big. We're going to purge out things like our detail, like their details. There's no reason that we have a ton of drafting views, especially if we already have a copy of the model sitting in an archive, and then we also have all the PDFs. So by having that stack of PDFs from them, we will definitely be able to resort back to that. And then on top of that, we will have some of our project managers and our foremen, they'll be able to revert back to the PDFs as well, especially if they're out in the field and they've got their tablets and everything and just kind of diving through. They'll be able to scan through some of that. Also, we'll clear out any of the linked CAD stuff that we may not need. Keep in mind, you guys may need to deal with some site stuff, and we know a lot of site stuff still comes across as linked CAD. We can keep those files in there, but the rest of the stuff that we may need, maybe linked CAD from a detail that they just didn't have in Revit yet or converted over, you can clear through all that stuff, knock that out. That will definitely help on performance. Any unnecessary linked Revit models. So in some cases, architects will have 4 or 5 different design option models in there, and they instead of using design options, they create new Revit models. Well, that's something that we can clear off as well, and that will help provide some better performance also. And then anything unrelated to that VDC model specifically, clear that stuff off. So clear a chunk of that out. If you know you might need something, save those couple of items. Outside of that, the rest of it can be cleared. That will help give you the performance, and that will help get you guys on the road to success. So at this point, does anybody have any questions or any comments or concerns? Okay, I'm not really seeing any questions or comments at this point. I would like to, again, I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to attend this webinar. If you have any further questions regarding anything we went over today in the webinar and taking any deeper dives or anything along those lines, whether it's the MEPPP, training on this specific topic in general, or help with the MEP, VDC, or even design project work, feel free. Just reach out to your local rep with ATG USA. And if you're not sure who your local rep is, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. My information is up here on the screen, Levija@atgusa.com, or also I'm in LinkedIn as well. You're welcome to reach out to me there, whether you send me a direct message or anything along those lines. Feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll be glad to get you in touch with your local sales rep. Outside of that, I'd like to definitely thank everybody, and I hope you guys have a great day.